Welcome to the Matt and Kendal Hagee podcast. We're so glad that you're joining us wherever you're at. If you're driving, if you're at home or at work, you're listening to this podcast, and we welcome you today as Matt and I are recording this episode from home in the comfort of our closet, but we're able to share with you about the most recent CUFI Summit.
Exactly. You know, there were so many wonderful speakers that we wanted to share several of them with you. And one of them that is my absolute favorites is Dennis Prager. Now, I don't know if you've had the chance to listen to him on syndicated radio, but he is a brilliant and bright mind. And the way that he is able to talk about current events and modern issues and utilize biblical wisdom, I've always just been drawn to. He's one of the individuals that I read excessively because he currently is writing commentaries about the book of Genesis, the book of Exodus. He's going to do the entire Torah because he was trained in yeshiva, which is the rabbinical school, as a child, and he's got an incredible amount of Bible and scripture knowledge. And like I said, not only does he take that information, but he combines it with political information. And actually, he's having such an impact that he's facing a tremendous amount of persecution, is what I call it, from organizations like Facebook and YouTube through Prager University. Prager University is something that he has put together with a team of educators, and they have 5-minute videos about various topics: political, religious, family topics, all kinds of different things. They've gotten over 1 billion views. Wow. And those, hey, we want
1 billion views.
We would like to have 1 million views. So, you know, we'll
That's right. Let's take a couple of thousand. We'll go for it.
Yeah, 100,000 would be nice. But he's had over 1 billion views on his videos there. And the thing about it is they're now being labeled as hate speech because they're talking about, you know, the historical perspective of things that are presently not politically correct. You know, I mean, he's talking about, you know, in some situations he's challenging same-sex marriage, or he's talking about abortion. And, you know, in one, he talked about the 10 Commandments.
I was going to say, that's what I remember.
And 10 Commandments was labeled by Facebook in the same category as pornography. If you can imagine that.
No.
But Dennis Prager stood up in front of the Christians United for Israel Summit and shared in his session about the reason why Israel is one of the most targeted nations on earth in terms of ridicule, scrutiny, scorn, and individuals trying to delegitimize them. Why aren't people trying to delegitimize Italy? Why aren't people trying to delegitimize Pakistan? Why aren't people trying to delegitimize some other nation? What is it about Israel that creates the issue in this modern world? And Dennis has some great insight, and I think that you would enjoy hearing it. Take a listen.
I've spoken at CUFI's National Convention often, and I have to tell you, it is a highlight in my life. I spoke 2 weeks ago at the European Parliament. Somehow I feel more kindred spirit here than I did there. But this is infinitely, I never patronize an audience. To say that you are more important than the European Parliament comes from the depths of my soul and my heart. I just want you to know that. You are shaping the world for the good. All right, so I have been asked to speak about anti-Semitism. I have a wonderful habit of speaking exactly on what people ask me to speak on. But I want you to know that I am not speaking about this subject because I am a Jew. Whatever I have to say, I believe I would say if I were Christian, if I were atheist, if I were agnostic, if I were anything. Truth is truth. It can't be dependent on who you are. So I want to tell you some truths about anti-Semitism and why the work you are doing is so extraordinarily valuable. Anti-Semitism is the greatest evil early warning system that there is in the world. The moment you see Jew hatred, and in our time that means Israel hatred, You know all you need to know about the morality of the people who are espousing that. That is all you need. Churchill knew this. Churchill was the only Brit in the 20s and especially the 30s, of course, to say, hey, wait a minute. There is no chance for peace in Europe because Hitler hates the Jews. Churchill understood this alone among British leaders. That's all you need to know, Churchill said. Churchill was right. That is all you need to know. Everything else follows. The people who hate Israel hate America. The people who hate Israel hate everything noble and good on this planet. It is not an aberration. There is no such thing as, he's a really great guy, but he hates Israel. He's a really great guy, but he just has this thing about Jews. It doesn't work. You're not a really great guy. And it's true about any group. If you hate a group for being a group, I get it. But there is something specific about Jew hatred and Israel hatred. And let me make something clear. There is no difference between Jew hatred and Israel hatred. Everyone must understand this. This notion, oh, I love Jews, but I'm anti-Zionist, I'm not anti-Semitic? Okay, what if somebody said to you, I love Italians, but I don't think Italy has the right to exist? Every Italian would regard the person as a fraud. You would too. If you don't think Italy has a right to exist, you're anti-Italian. It's as simple as that. Anti-Zionist means that of the 220 countries on earth, only one you deem unworthy of existence. A country the size of El Salvador, a country the size of New Jersey. The only Jewish country in 220 countries is the only one you don't think is worthy of existence. You, my friend, are anti-Jewish. Whether you think it or not is irrelevant. So aside from the evil of anti-Zionism, it's the dishonesty that drives me crazy. They fool themselves. Oh, I love Jews, I just hate Zionism. Zionism is the movement of the Jews back to Zion. That's all it is. It is the oldest national movement on the planet of Earth. It is one of the most powerful things that has ever happened in human history, that a people returned to its land after 2,000 years of diaspora. There is no parallel on the face of the earth. The only states that ever existed in the area known as Israel, the Holy Land, or Palestine have been Jewish ones. The first Jewish Commonwealth, the second Jewish Commonwealth, and the third Jewish Commonwealth known as Israel. Those are the only independent and sovereign states to ever exist there. There was never an Arab state, there was never a Muslim state, there was never any other state. Only Jewish states. If any nation has a right to a place, it is the Jewish nation. So let's please, this is a very important intellectual honesty issue. Anti-Zionism or anti-Israel, pro-BDS, you only want to economically choke one country on earth, then you're anti-Jewish. A man once called my radio show, and it's happened many times, of course, well, you know, Israel's founding was in violence and illegitimate. And I asked the guy, I said, I'm just curious, did you ever call a talk show and argue that Pakistan's existence was illegitimate? The guy didn't even know what I was asking. Nobody does, because nobody knows about Pakistan's founding. Pakistan was ripped out of India to create a Muslim state right before Israel was in 1947. Millions of Hindus, millions of Muslims died and were refugees. It dwarfs all loss of life and all refugees in the founding of Israel. Why doesn't anybody say Pakistan is illegitimate? There was never a Pakistan in the history of the world. It's a made-up name. I don't think Pakistan is illegitimate. That's not my point. But why isn't it? If Israel is not legitimate, what country is legitimate? It is so obviously just anti-Jewish. Israel is among the nations what the Jew was inside the nations. That's all it is. Anti-Semitism has morphed from anti the Jew to anti the Jewish people, or anti the Jewish state. That is all that has happened. When that is the only state you deem illegitimate, there is something wrong with you. And I gotta tell you something, the anti-Israel ideas that permeate our universities, if my theory is right, that anti-Zionism / anti-Semitism is one of the most accurate describers of the moral conscience of an individual or a group, then my friends, I have very serious news for you. There is something wrong with our universities. The most anti-Israel institution in America is the university. That's an amazing thing. I'd like to tell you, though, parenthetically, why I think that is. I have an article on the internet which you would find of interest. It's called How I Found God at Columbia. And it is the truth, by the way. It is the truth. It is not a cute line. Many years ago, I was a graduate student at Columbia University. And I was frankly going crazy. My teachers were teaching me nonsense. Brilliant people were teaching me nonsense. Men and women are basically the same. America and the Soviet Union were moral equals. I was learning nonsense, and I was going a little nutty. One day, in the middle of Columbia, thinking about how is it that all these bright people are teaching me silly things, indeed dangerously silly things, all of a sudden, so help me God, it wasn't a theophany, but it was an epiphany. And I never had another one. This was a major moment in my life. All of a sudden, a biblical phrase in Hebrew entered my brain, because I had studied in yeshiva, Jewish religious school, from childhood until college. And so it was all done in Hebrew. But I had not said this verse in 15 or 20 years. 15 years. Not said it since I had been a kid. And out of nowhere, Reshit Chochmah Yirat Hashem. Wisdom begins with fear of God. Now, why would that verse come to my brain when I'm thinking about why is there no wisdom at Columbia? And that was my answer. No God, no wisdom. That has permeated my life. That realization has permeated my life. So when I say to you, why is the university the most anti-Israel, in other words, the most morally bankrupt major institution in the West, not just America, that's the answer. No God, no wisdom. There are foolish people who believe in God. I'm not saying everyone who believes in God is wise, but I'm saying that all institutions that get rid of God become stupid. That I am saying. There is no exception on the face of the Western world's earth. That is what I realized. That is why, by the way, there's another article you should look up that I wrote recently, How the Left Keeps Me Religious. And it's as true as my Columbia story. When I realize what happens when God is negated, I realize then that God probably does exist. We really do need God, because I realize what the negation of God leads to. So that is they've had a very powerful impact on me. This is the university. This is the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and anti-American. Anti-American. It all follows. And to teach the roots of America are biblical, oh my God, you can't get worse. Here's a very interesting thing, a tidbit that you'll find fascinating. At Prager University, we have put out about 400 of 5-minute videos. They come out every week. And many of them get a lot of hate, which we expect. The ones that defend Israel get a lot of hate. The ones that defend America get a lot of hate. The ones that defend any Western value gets a lot of hate. But do you know what gets the most hate of all? Whenever we put out a video that makes the case for God or the Ten Commandments. Do you know that Google has placed my video on the Ten Commandments on the restricted list along with pornography? Yes, I will be testifying on this. I'm coming back to Washington next week. I will be testifying on this in the Senate. And I'll tell you why. To the left, the Ten Commandments is pornography. That's why. There is no other explanation. That's what they hate. That there is an authority higher than us that tells me how to live. Screw you is their view. That is it in a nutshell. And that is why there is such loathing of you, especially you Christians. By the way, it's all part of a package. Anti-Christian, anti-Israel, it's all part of a package. I'll come to that at the very end. Why are the Jews hated? I wrote a whole book on this, so let me give you a synopsis. Ultimately, hatred of the Jews is hatred of God, hatred of Bible, hatred of the Ten Commandments. The interesting thing is most Jews do not know this. Most Jews would not agree with me, but it doesn't matter. The Jews represent something so much higher than their own self-consciousness that it doesn't matter. Whether a Jew is religious or anti-religious, whether the Jew is anti-Zionist or not, is irrelevant to my point. The Jews embody God in the world, period. The hatred of the Jew is ultimately that hatred. That is why the term Christian anti-Semite should be an oxymoron. It is inconceivable for a Christian not to hate himself if he hates the Jews. That is not possible. Forget theology, just on rational grounds alone. There's no such thing. It can't be. Edward Flannery was a member of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops. He wrote about 40 years ago. It was Judaism that brought the concept of a God-given universal moral law into the world. The Jew carries the burden of God in history, and for this they have never been forgiven. That is exactly right. Jews carry the burden of God in history, whether they are atheists or religious or Zionist or anti-Zionist. It is a fact. That is what the Jew, I tell fellow Jews, hey, listen, since we're going to be hated anyway, we might as well carry the burden of God consciously. I always debate whether to make this point because it is not for me to ever say anything about what it was like in a death camp. So it is with deep hesitation, but nevertheless deep conviction. As a Jew, I'll speak to you for a moment. I've been obsessed in a certain sense with the Holocaust, though I'm third generation American, but I've been obsessed with it since I was a child. And I often have thought the following. There was really only one division that mattered in the gas chamber. Didn't matter if you were rich or poor. Didn't matter if you were religious or irreligious. Right? Everybody was thrown in to die a horrible death. There was one distinction between Jews that I think mattered. Those who understood why they were in the gas chamber and those who didn't. That matters. There is no consoling the horrors of Auschwitz. It is not possible. But to believe that your death is meaningless is an even greater curse than to be killed, than to be murdered. Whereas a Jew who understood we carry the burden of God in history, and the Nazis hate that God, and the Nazis hate that Ten Commandments, that at least gave you some understanding of the horror with which you were confronted. That division matters. I understand Jew hatred. I understand Israel hatred. For that matter, I understand Christian hatred today, and I understand America hatred. And they're all wrapped up in one. America was founded to be a second Israel, not a replacement to the first Israel, but a second Israel. This country put a verse from the Torah on the Liberty Bell. That is how deeply wrapped in Jewish history and Judaism and the Old Testament and the Torah the founders were. The symbol of Yale University is Urim v'Tumim, the breastplate of the high priest. It's in Hebrew. The breastplate of the high priest. I'm telling you, if Yale students knew what their insignia said, they would riot against it. That's the last thing they would want representing them, the high priest in the Hebrew in Leviticus. They wouldn't know how to spell Leviticus, a senior at Yale. This is why there is Jew hatred. It's ultimately God hatred, a God who demands things like the Ten Commandments. That's why of all the videos we put out, those are the ones that get the most hatred. Where is it coming from today? Today it is coming from the left and from the Islamic world. Not from liberals. Liberals were always pro-Jewish. I always make this distinction on my radio show and in my writings. Leftism and liberalism have almost nothing in common. Unfortunately, most liberals don't know that. But Israel is one of the examples. Liberals from Harry Truman on were the greatest pro-Israel political force in American life. The left has always hated the Jews and Israel, always. They have nothing in common about race. Liberals are for integrated dormitories on college campuses. Leftists are for race-based, segregation-based dormitories on college campuses. College campuses almost all have black dormitories. What is liberal about that? Harvard has a black graduation exercise. That's not liberal. That's old-fashioned segregationism. That's all it is. But it's the left that carries it on. Liberals need to understand you don't have anything in common with the left. Alan Dershowitz said to me in the film that's coming out this year with Adam Carolla and myself, No Safe Spaces, in his apartment, as an American, as a Jew, as a liberal, I fear the left much more than the right. This is where this new anti-Semitism is coming from. And from the Islamic world. Not every Muslim is an anti-Semite, everybody knows that. But it's coming from the Islamic world. That's one of the reasons to beware about vast influxes of Muslims into Western society. It has nothing to do with race, it has to do with values. Hey, I tell Floridians to beware of New Yorkers moving into Florida. It's got nothing to do with race. New Yorkers and Floridians are the same race. People bring values with them when they move. That's clear. And if you move from the Arab Middle East, you bring Jew hatred with you. That's a fact, not an opinion, not a smear, not an attack. It's either true or a lie. Do Muslims from the Middle East bring Jew hatred with them to Sweden, to France, to England, and to America? Yes, they do. Why can't we tell the truth? Because truth lovers don't run the New York Times or the organs of dissemination in America. That's why these two new representatives in Congress from Michigan and Minnesota, it's so easy for them to say Jews buy America. Jewish money controls America. That's what they were raised with in the Muslim Middle East. This is par for the course. It is mother's milk, as it were. In Sweden, Jews are leaving Sweden. Jews who have lived there their whole lives, who thank Sweden for saving their life in the Holocaust. The Jerusalem Post reported Jews saved by the Swedes in the Holocaust are leaving Sweden because of the influx of Muslims and the anti-Jew hatred that they bring with them. It is astonishing that you can't talk about this in polite company. Let me end by telling you how important what you're doing is. I wrote a list of things that CUFI should really also call itself. You're not just Christians United for Israel, you're Christians United for Jews. You're Christians United for Christianity. You are Christians United for Christ. You are Christians United for America. You are Christians United for freedom. And you are Christians United for God. Well, I must say, given your reaction, I should have ended with that. I really blew it. I'll end with something I have said. I always debate whether I should say it, because I don't say things for emotional impact, and I certainly don't like to repeat myself. But I said this at the first time I spoke for Pastor Hagee at his church. By the way, just a word. Pastor Hagee is a giant among us. I just needed to say that. And Pastor Matt, you are doing some phenomenal work. God bless you, my friend. So I will end with this. I had no intention of saying this the first time I went. I actually teared up so much watching all these Christians celebrate Jews, because Jews are not used to that. It's like one guy once called my show, because I was defending the name Washington Redskins, which, by the way, turned out that American Indians, 90% couldn't care less about. It was all hysteria. Anyway, I defended the name. A guy calls up, he said, "Hey, Dennis, what would you think if a team were named after the Jews?" I said, "Sir, Jews have been looking for fans for 3,000 years. I thought it was a great idea. So you got to understand, we're not used to being liked. So I go to my first CUFI event. These people are singing Israeli and Jewish songs in perfect Hebrew and just speaking from the heart about their love for the Jews. And it's like I died and went to another universe. It's like a parallel universe here from what I had been used to. So it was then I spontaneously said, which is not easy to say because it's very revealing and vulnerable making, but it's okay. There is something that almost every Jew feels that they never articulate when they meet a Christian or even just a non-Jew. And that is, if there were another Holocaust, and every Jew worries about that, if there were another, would these people hide me? And I looked at my first CUFI group and said, you would hide me. God bless you, my friends. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You guys, I hope that you enjoyed what Dennis had to say. You know, Kendal and I want to remind you that in a few months, we're going to be taking a trip to Israel.
Yes, in 2020, in June, we are going on a family Israel trip. And so if you are interested, go to jchim.org and get more information.
We want you guys to come with us. It's for families, young families, parents with children, grandparents, parents, and children. We are going to go and have a great time experiencing the land of the Bible together. We're going to be there for 7-8 days. And so, dads, if you're worried about work, we're going to make sure that we leave on
be about 5 days off of work.
Yeah, we're going to leave on a weekend, and we'll be back before the following work week begins. We recognize that there's a lot of young families that have to make those kinds of plans.
And it's during the summer, so your kids are already off.
Your kids are off, but the most important thing is we are going to take your children to Israel and teach them that the Bible is real, that the Word of God is alive, and our purpose is to engage them at a young age with truth so that that truth will guide them through the rest of their lives. We hope that this podcast today has made an everyday difference in your life, and we want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen. Kendal, talk to them again about how to subscribe. Leave us a review.
Leave us comment reviews. We love to read them, and share this with your friends, anybody that you know that needs to listen to this podcast. And we pray that this is making an everyday difference in your life.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye,
We'll talk to you
guys.
soon.